You're watching Byline Wilmington on CBS 10 WILM. Here's your host, Don Ansell.
And we're back with our guest, Dr. Jim Leutze. He's a noted historian and Chancellor Emeritus of UNC Wilmington. We're talking about the war zones and some of the military hotspots around the world that the U.S. is involved in. Before we get to Iraq, let me finish up with Pakistan. Pakistan and India have had tensions. Actually, I think 3 wars since their independence from Great Britain in '47. What should our role be there?
Well, you know, we have had an on and off again relationship with India over that period of time. There was a period of time in which India was the primary neutral that was, in a sense, trying to play the game between the United States and the Soviet Union and being a neutral power. They have more recently become more friendly to the United States. Our relationships with them is a good one. I'm not totally satisfied with how we bought some of that good relationship with the Indians, including providing them with nuclear technology and material and so on. But that's over the dam. However, it's interesting that I think for the first time in that period since independence, the United States, Pakistan, and India have a common enemy, and that enemy is Muslim fundamentalism. Obviously, that's an enemy as far as India is concerned, which is a Hindu country, and you saw that in Mumbai, and they saw their vulnerability there. The Pakistanis can see it in areas like the Swat Valley and other things where there's growing Muslim fundamentalism, and of course we've felt the pain of dealing with that. So we have a common enemy for the first time.
There's nothing that unites better than a common enemy.
Nothing better than a common enemy, but I think the weak link in this is Pakistan and the dubious reliability of the Pakistani army, which I think is shot full of Taliban sympathizers, as is their intelligence service.
And as I mentioned, much of this started with 9/11 and the search for bin Laden. And this has been discussed, why we went into Iraq endlessly. We might as well put our piece into it as well. Why did we get sidetracked into evading Iraq? We started with Afghanistan.
In my own view, Afghanistan was plenty, as we can see. Had we dealt with it more effectively at the beginning, I think we would not be facing the kinds of problems. So I think there's no question that Iraq was a diversion. But as some say, that's water over, even for a historian, I'd have to say, in a sense, that will have to wait for later analysis. There's also the question of how we fought the war, and I think for a long period we fought the war not very wisely in how we dealt with that. I think Petraeus has brought a more logical approach to the war than we had been following by seeing it as a counterinsurgency, and I think things have obviously gotten better in Iraq.
Well, considering that it has seemed to produce a fledgling democracy, was it worth it? Time will tell.
I would say seems to produce a fledgling. I think you've hit on some key words there. We will have to see. There are big issues that have not been resolved, including the division of oil resources. And so you have the Sunnis, the Shias, and the Kurds that are all interested in getting a share of the oil resources. I personally, I think in the long run, see something of a modified 3-state solution in Iraq, rather than
what Biden was suggesting. Suggesting that,
and others were looking.
So you think that it'll move to that?
By some form of that. The issue in Iraq, back since the 1920s, has been the issue of whether you are going to have a decentralized government or if you're going to have a centralized government. And no one has ever fully resolved that, except a dictator who resolved it and said it's going to be Baghdad. That's where it's going.
Of course, we're still there, and we're still we're spending money.
And we'll be there for a long time.
Yeah.
We will have a presence in Iraq for a long time. Of course, the footprint will be smaller, and theoretically these will be support troops and not combat troops. It's a distinction in some sense without a difference, but in any case.
The cost is approaching $600 billion, and they say it'll go over $1 trillion.
There is one estimate that says $3 trillion.
How do you think, I mean, we hear about the housing problem in America. How is that paying for that war contributed to our economic crisis?
I'm not an economist, and I can't say, but I think that one can look at this and say, this is the first protracted war, and this is, I think, now the second longest war we've ever gotten, if you count Korea, that's still going on, or so on. But it has been a long war, an expensive war, and it's the first time we haven't raised taxes in order to pay for that war. And
we cut taxes
it actually cut taxes. So it has to have a deleterious negative effect on our overall economic balance.
And the president campaigned on, we'll be out of Iraq in 18 months. You said we will be there a long time, not necessarily with combat troops.
Right.
Can our combat troops be out in 18 months?
I think some of the commanders are now saying yes, that they can. I mean, some of the new people on the ground are saying yes, they can. Of course, as I say, in a sense, combat troops, support troops is a distinction without a difference. Support troops are troops that are there to train and supply and help build the Iraqi army. If there's an emergency, they go in and pick up their weapons and they become combat troops.
Right.
So I think that we have a less open-ended commitment than we did under the Bush administration.
Another intense military hotspot is Gaza. And it's such a complicated issue with a long history. How would you assess what's going on in our involvement there?
Well, the real problem, I think, is the recent election, the Israeli election, in which it is going to be necessary, apparently, for the moderates to make a coalition government with the, I'd say, hardliners or more extremist party headed by Netanyahu. I think that there are those who believe that there very likely will be an Israeli attack against the Iranian nuclear plants within the next year or 18 months, that the public in Israel will demand that. And when that comes, all bets are off. Now, I hope that's not going to happen.
Well, how effective do you think the special envoy, former Senator George Mitchell, can be?
If anybody can do it, probably Mitchell can do it. He helped cut the Gordian knot in Ireland, Northern Ireland.
Right.
He actually, I was surprised to find by his background, you wouldn't think George Mitchell, but he is Lebanese, I believe. He has,
yes, his mother, I believe.
His mother is Lebanese. So he has some ties to the Middle East and great diplomatic skills and experience, but it's almost an unsolvable problem because the people who are causing the trouble in that area are Hamas and Hezbollah. They are the cat's paw for Syria and Iran. So you're dealing with four separate entities, more or less loosely connected. So if you're really going to negotiate, you're going to have to negotiate with Iran and Syria, not with Hamas and Hezbollah, because you can cut off Hezbollah and Hamas.
We're going to leave it there. We'll come back and talk more about some of the other military hotspots, and we'll talk about Iran as well. Stay with us.